Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Elliott64, and welcome to the RoboCast. I'm joined alongside
Steve the American Killjoy.
And World of Woodrow.
And we are joined by a guest for the 7th episode of BattleBots 2020, or is it 21 at this point? I'm so confused. Anyway, guests, introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, I'm Will from Will's Hypershock.
I'm Will from Will.
Yeah, I'm Will from Will Bales and his Hypershock thing.
Cool. Will, an absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you. You have, I think it's fair to say, one of our favorite looking machines in the entire competition. It stands out like a sore thumb because it's so bright and it's so wonderful. And yeah, I mean,
it's the prettiest sore thumb.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, everyone else has black T-shirts and black or silvery robots, and we said, okay, how do we stand out?
Neon yellow,
bright yellow, and obnoxious colors was the go-to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you've been with BattleBots now for the last 5 seasons. You've been in every reboot season. Like, what is it that keeps you coming back? And obviously, you build a new machine every year. Like, what is it that really drives you to come back every year?
We're gluttons for punishment. It's fun. The whole reason we started doing it was because it was fun, and we actually started back in elementary school, Tyler and I, and we built them through, starting at like age 12 all the way through the end of high school, 18, and we just enjoyed doing it. So when the show came back, it was an opportunity to reconnect with old classmates, old friends, and start doing the fun stuff again. And we've kind of vowed to keep doing it as long as it's still fun.
Which clearly is at the moment, because it's been a good season. I've been enjoying it, absolutely. Speaking of the season, I think we do have to talk about your first fight a little bit before we crack on with this episode.
We gotta. Yeah. Let's get it out of the way.
What happened against Gruff? Because there just seemed to be, I don't know what it was, but it didn't flow. Hypershock has this nice flow when it drives around the arena. It's very smooth, and it didn't seem right.
So let me back up 3 months before that. Yep. So filming was October 2nd through 15th in Long Beach, California. June 22nd through September 5th, I was in Denmark. For work. I was only supposed to go for 2 weeks, but 2 weeks turned into 3 months. So I was out of town. Meanwhile, BattleBots was discussing maybe doing something in late July, maybe early August, late August, early September, and it just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. So no one worked on the robot at all, myself included. And so originally, when the pandemic was starting to rear its ugly head in the US, and BattleBots decided to pull the plug for the time being, March 18th or something like that, we just dropped everything. We left the workshop. We didn't go back. We kind of just recuperated for a little bit and let our minds recongeal. But it meant that we weren't done. We weren't close to done. Teams like Witch Doctor, for example, were far more squared away and much more responsible. They had 2 robots ready in crates, sitting there waiting.
That's just ridiculous. That being that prepared for anything.
Yeah.
So much to the effect that they decided, we'll just go to BattleBots. Why not? We were unsure if we were going to go. Like, yeah, we'll just pick up and go. That's what we heard anyway.
Yeah, and they loved rubbing it in our face, reminding us of that. Yeah. We have robots that are ready, and you don't. We didn't have finished CAD.
Did you not think, can I borrow one of yours and paint it bright yellow?
we seriously considered a grand robot heist.
Oh wow!
We had the codes to get into their workshops.
Oh my god!
The scheming begins.
Yeah. So like August 6th, sometime around there, BattleBot said, "All right, we're gonna do it," and Discovery agreed. We're gonna try to film in October. And so I'm abroad, and I'm sitting in this tiny little hotel with my laptop, like just catting away all night. That's why we ended up with weird things like dinosaurs in the robot. Delirium. And so I was catting to beat the band. Tyler and some other teammates were in Miami starting to do CAD and just get parts and start to build things as fast as possible. My brother Max flew in and was in charge of getting all the sheet metal parts made. So in the course of, it was about 4 weeks, not even a month, from September 5th to October 2nd, we finished the CAD, made all the parts, and started to assemble it. So we were behind the 8 ball, to say the least, which is par for the course. but we weren't exactly firing on all cylinders. Then the day before we flew out, we still had a crate full of stuff that we still had to get out there. BattleBots provides shipping for the responsible teams up to, it's like 2 weeks out, a week and a half out, which is great, and it's free as long as you can afford to sit around and twiddle your thumbs for a month and a half or a week and a half. We could not.
That's not. I mean,
so
you have form for building your robot on site, but
right, exactly.
It's
so
a bit more extenuous than like other circumstances.
Yeah. So the day before we were supposed to film, or supposed to fly out, Thursday afternoon at like 4:00, a freight truck came and picked up another 1,000-pound crate from us for overnight delivery, which, as you can imagine, isn't exactly cheap. But we did it last year, and it showed up the next day. So it was like, it was the best. It was You took all the stuff and just it appeared there. And we had like 13 checked bags. It was insane.
Oh my gosh!
So we show up to BattleBots and the crate's not there. We're like, that's weird, but it's fine. But it'll show up later today. Well, we start calling around, and around 5:00 Eastern time, California's 3 hours behind. Basically, end of business day on this Friday, we finally get an email saying, hey, well, there was an issue and it got to Memphis. All packages go to Memphis in the US. So it got stuck in Memphis, and it was supposed to get on a plane, but the plane was too heavy and you guys drew the short straw. So it didn't exactly get to LA, but it'll probably be there Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye. And we're like, not good. Because our first fights are supposed to be Monday. Right. So we got on the horn and we finally tracked it down, and the crate had somehow actually made it to LA that afternoon.
Wow.
And it was in a locked warehouse in Compton.
Fun.
So yeah, logistics nightmares basically with this year. I mean, obviously, I know the pandemic kind of helped with obviously preparation. Obviously, you being in Europe, being stuck over here with like so much work to do and not enough time to do it, not knowing, I imagine, if you'd get back in time. Like,
it wasn't an ideal situation.
No, that's very fair.
So Saturday morning, we successfully picked up the crate from Compton, and so we finally had all our parts, which were all the armor.
So Hypershock straight out of Compton?
Yeah, it's most of Hypershock, all the electronics, all the armor, all the weapons, all the wheels, 2 of the chassis.
The main bits, yeah.
Most of the electronics, some important stuff.
The robot. The robot.
So, and Gruff was right next to us in the pit, so they saw all this silliness going on, and all our panics. So going into the Gruff fight, we were building the robot for the first time with now a day and a half less. Oh, and I forgot. The week before we were supposed to fly out, Tyler, my right-hand man, other, serious engineer, the only real serious engineer on the team, he broke his ankle.
Wow.
Riding an electric bike outside and taking a break. And so instead of going to BattleBots with us, and he was in charge of the self-righting mechanism, he was going into surgery instead. So he didn't make it to filming.
Oh my God. So
we show up Friday, the first day of filming, with 1,000 pounds of missing parts, a man down, and a self-rider that's not finished because he was finishing it when he hurt himself. So he couldn't finish it in time. So yeah, and then we go fight a lifter.
Yeah, as you would, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good explanation as to why the fight didn't quite go to plan with Gruff, but
Yeah.
other than that, I mean,
Yeah. In short, the thing that really happened with the Gruff fight was we were up against time, and so all the tuning parameters with the brushless motors are very finicky. And of course, because we're Hypershock, we're right at the ragged edge of what you can really do. So we're trying to get twice the speed out of stuff that everyone else is. Which, when it works, is great, but getting it there is a struggle. So we go into that fight not having more than maybe 5 minutes of checking the motors and like getting things to work. So the fact that it moved at all was a miracle. But the real reason that Hypershock stopped and just looked dead at the end of that fight was all the chains for the drivetrain and the weapon had come off. They'd come loose. So this is the first year that we were doing chains for drive on the inside and for the weapon. And in my hubris thought, oh, well, we won't need tensioners. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we made tensioners later that day.
Right.
Good deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, your next fight is against Mammoth. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But I suppose we should probably talk about the episode as a whole. We start off with two machines that have had, is it fair to say, a fairly rough run of form in Shrederator and Axe Backwards? Like, it feels like...
Understatement.
Yeah. Sure. They've struggled to pick up wins here and there, which is a shame because they both clearly have potential to do well. It's just they can't do it when it counts, basically.
Yeah. Brian's had success on other shows, just not recent BattleBots. It's just a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. This was a really good fight. I really enjoyed this. It was a good back and forth.
It was really showing off what these two bots can do when they, really properly work. Axe Backwards coming in with a wedge design, which was kind of inspired. Obviously it didn't have axes at the back, but it worked. Captain Shrederator was riding up the wedge, bouncing off the drum and flying, and it handled it reasonably well. Obviously, Captain Shrederator managed to get some quite critical hits in, eventually sort of taking wheel off, but it was really, really solid effort from Axe Backwards. Definitely their strongest showing of late, I think.
I think probably since 2018 when they won their fight. I think I haven't seen Axe Backwards work that well since then.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because it's so wonderful, but it's just it's had a rough run.
Well, Kurt doesn't necessarily hold winning matches as
of course
the standard that he's
trying
to. He wants good fights, and entertaining fights. But I was amazed at how careful and precise he was driving. The dexterity that he showed in that match is a direct contrast to the flailing about that he normally displays.
Maybe it was like a pride thing. Like, he didn't want to be the one with the biggest L. That's
a good point.
Like these two, as I said, the records of Shrederator and Backwards over the last couple of seasons has been fairly poor.
Yeah.
I think neither of them wanted to lose it, and it came up with a good fight, and it was great to watch. And then Captain Shrederator went and died at the end.
it pulled a gigabyte.
Never stopped.
Died. It stayed alive.
Lived forever.
Well, once you start winning, you have to keep spinning. That's the conclusion of Spin to Win.
Yeah, I was going to say he took it a little too far for Spin to Win, but hey,
they won and they kept spinning.
Wonder how long it spanned for. That is
40 minutes.
Yeah.
Damn. I know. So Invader had similar issues back in 2016 where they just kept
Gigabyte
going
in that Rumble
going.
had to just sit there and spin.
40 minutes. Wow.
It was long. But Greg Munson and Peter Abramson both came up to me while we were standing there, because our fight was like right after theirs. And we were just sitting around, and both of them said that it was the best fight that either of them had ever had. They loved it.
Yeah.
It was. I can absolutely attest to that. They were both, giving it as good as they got, and they put on a good show. I mean, that's what more can you ask for? The pair of them. I think Captain Shrederator, as you say, Will, is probably seeking wins more than maybe Axe Backward is, because obviously Kurt is more of an entertainer rather than a competitive beast. I think Brian definitely is a competitive beast and wants to win. Shred's now at 1-1. Where do we go from here? Like a win, and suddenly they're in that conversation of bracket territory.
Meanwhile, Witch Doctor's 0-2, Rotator's
I know.
0-2.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
So weird.
isn't it?
No, you bunch of sandbaggers, man. They're gonna get a low seed and then just run the table.
They're doing that old double elimination strategy of going in the losers bracket and winning the whole thing that way. Big brain plays.
Salty.
Let's move on. Let's move on to P1 and Copperhead. Nice to see P1 finally.
Yeah.
We've waited, and it's a shame we didn't really get to see much of it in this fight because, I mean, Copperhead's just so good. It's just
I mean,
so good.
P1 coming off of a win against Kronos, obviously untelevised, but we got to see brief highlights of P1 propping up their spinner against the wall, which was, great to see the front hinge flipper work. Also great to almost hear them use the term front hinge flipper. We had hinge flipper, which is, it's an interesting statement.
There. Almost there.
But
it is a hinge flipper, technically.
It is definitely a hinge flipper.
There is a hinge. Flippers do have hinges.
Most certainly, yeah. But yeah, no, P1, it's a robot that it really looks good. And it's nice to see it get the form as well as function there, in tandem. Didn't necessarily get to see it in this fight, unfortunately. But Copperhead is a very different beast this year.
Yeah, it seems that they've ironed out just about everything that was going wrong with it last year. And I mean, it looks like they pulled it out of hibernation with it being all rusty, but it sure doesn't look like it's picked up any of that just because it sat around. It's definitely looks like it's primed and ready for that bracket. I would be scared going up against that, honestly, because it really hasn't shown any reason for us to think that it'll just die.
No,
you're really gonna have to punch that thing in the mouth to kill it.
2 hit KOs on both Gigabyte and now P1 as well.
Yeah,
it's done it in 4 hits so far.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see who their third fight is because I know at the end they called out Black Dragon, so I'd really like to see that fight.
That would be a good one. Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I think one of the things that last season that hindered Copperhead was I believe they had issues last season with like their drum, didn't they? They had to cut something away. I can't exactly remember.
Yeah, their drum wasn't balanced when they got it, and they had to add a load of weld to one side and then shave it down to be balanced. It was quite the issue to have.
But this year, I mean, they were just so dominant. And P1, God bless it, they got the big hit at the start, and it's still going. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, come on. No, that's it. Never mind. You wait all season to get your fight on TV, and that's your lot. It's a bit of a shame, really, for P1, I have to say. Much more to add?
Sometimes you have good seasons, sometimes you have bad seasons.
This is true. This is true. There's not much more to add to that, so let's...
Yeah, it was such a quick fight, honestly.
Yeah, it really was. It was 2 hits. I mean, what more can you say?
Full backflip. Impressive.
Yeah, it was. A 10 from the judges, for sure. Fight 3, a battle of 2 hammers, Beta and Rusty. I don't know what they're thinking, to be honest with you. It's a complete mismatch of engineering. I mean,
it's so strange.
Beta against the almighty god that is Rusty. You can't do that.
It's unfair to Beta.
Exactly. It's just...
They're going to lose.
Exactly. Yeah. All jokes aside.
And the last fight, they didn't even use their hammer, so whatever.
All jokes aside.
We didn't even know if it worked until today.
It's a very odd situation. So the Beta Rotator fight obviously was their 3rd fight. So the fact that it's odd to think that at this point they have used their hammer, but they haven't used their hammer in the future past.
There was a lot of mind belt mending to make all that work. It was frustrating.
Absolutely. I'll give Rusty credit. They didn't back down. David went straight in there and tried his best. Ultimately, the quality, I think, of Beta just coming through, and the drive power on that thing is just ridiculous. It was just pushing it with tank treads at the side as well, just pushing it like it was nothing. The hammer shots, okay, yes, the armor maybe on Rusty isn't the most high end and the strongest, but it's just it split it. You can't really ask for much more than that. I would have said like just a little bit more hammer, considering, again, not to discredit Rusty, the caliber of opposition that they're fighting. You'd have thought they'd have gone, let's just make a show of it. Let's try and bash them up a little bit. But I can understand wanting to hold back and save more good hits for later.
Oh,
And he said it. He said the
And
thing.
he said the thing.
He said the thing. He said the thing.
God
Yeah,
bless John Reed.
it's a very odd set of matchups for Beta this year. You got Rotator, which is probably one of the matches you maybe expect to see for a previous top 4 bot, was it? I can't remember.
It made it to the quarters. It lost the tombstone there.
That's it. So you expect to see it fighting the Rotators, the sort of mid to upper field robots, and then you have Rusty, who I suppose at this point they're 1-0, so technically undefeated, I guess. But again, it's an odd one to put it up against. Perhaps a show of how much power Beta has,
Relative.
more than a showing of an equal fight, perhaps. But yeah, it felt very one-sided, which was a shame.
One-sided going in, honestly. I mean, we all love Dave and we all love his robot, but there's just no way he was going to come out on top of this. I mean, the only thing I think could have happened is that he could have got that little poker inside one of the little crevices at the top of Beta. If I don't know, I mean, that's the only thing that possibly could have happened.
I believe they were scared of that happening.
Yeah, I would
totally
be.
Could have happened.
Yeah, it totally could have happened.
And all how open it is on top. There was a real non-zero chance, but
yeah,
Beta.
So it's Beta. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead, Sam.
All I was going to say, I mean, I think the way that the weapon of Rusty kind of arcs as well, the way that it kind of approaches from, it's almost vertical, isn't it? Like it's you get a nice swooping motion from Beta. It's more of a
it's very much if you're in front of me, I'm there.
It's straight
whereas
down.
Beta is haha.
I don't know if that makes sense. This is audio as well. Like you're not going to see my hand motion.
You're not seeing
the
hands.
hands. But basically, like just take it's the way that it hits is it could have happened.
It's sort of a 90-degree hit as opposed to a 180 arc.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for there.
Yeah. So
Steve,
Will, how would you fight a Beta? Saying if you had fought a Beta, not saying you have. If you did.
If I had to fight Beta, that's the problem because he's such a good driver, and you're not going to win the ground game. I don't think. Certainly not us. We didn't even bother to try with Whiplash this year. I think it's the same thing you say for everybody. Oh, I'm gonna have to go to the side and
yeah,
just wait for a good hit and and do that thing. Basically, what we did to Mammoth, that would be the goal, because that's all you can do.
Yeah, it is tough, and as you say, Beta is so well driven, and John's done this for the past 2 decades at this point. He's.
It's amazing he's been around that long. There's a lot of drivers. There's a lot of people. As the sport gets older, you see, like, man, those people have been around for quite some time. So it's more or less fighting you're more fighting the driver than the robot. It seems sometimes.
Absolutely, and I think Beta at 2-0. I mean, they're fairly much a shoe-in for the bracket, aren't they? Like,
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
yeah.
They're a legend.
Exactly.
No matter how controversially.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how we get there, it's just that we get there, right?
Correct.
So, fight number 4. Will.
You naughty boy.
Talk us through it. I mean, obviously Mammoth won their first fight in very convincing style. Huge is no slouch. Obviously you fought Huge last year.
I thought that was one of the best fights that I've ever seen. But Mammoth Huge.
It was so
good. I loved it.
So good.
I was laughing the whole time. Amazing.
So what was your strategy? How do you approach Mammoth? Because obviously you mentioned you had technical issues and obviously issues getting the robot prepared as well. Like, what was the plan?
Well, it's kind of like I was saying. You don't want to hit the front if you can help it. And the only thing that we had on our side was speed, because it sure as hell wasn't size. So the plan was be patient. I had been read the riot act by Mike lately, basically saying, you need to be more patient, you idiot. You need to be more patient. And so I just kept saying in my head, be patient, be patient, be patient. So I'm just doing circles and waiting for them to mess up and waiting for them to okay, fine, I'll go the other way now and then go in, because it takes them long enough to spin around that gives me an opportunity. We got one hit in, got the one of their little arms off the front, and then it was a lot easier. I was surprised when we hit them straight on that it sent them flying in the opposite direction. We just kind of stayed in place. I was kind of taken aback for that.
Yeah.
But it worked. So
it was so cartoonish as well, like the way it was like backflipping over itself and flying into that far corner. It was just so unusual.
I mean, Mammoth is a robot cartoon, basically. It's a caricature of a BattleBot.
It's so great. I love it.
And obviously you knocked off the front arms, and I imagine by that point they're a little bit less stable. I think that's the wheels are kind of positioned at the front of their main frame, but then it's kind of kept in balance by those arms, and obviously if they're gone.
Yeah, once they start teetering a lot, then it's much harder to drive, and they're geared fairly quickly too. They've got a serious drivetrain, so Ricky's a great driver. But yeah, once it's flailing about all that, it gets harder, especially when half of your flipping arm gets ripped off.
Yeah, that doesn't help. You really buckled their arm pretty good.
There were some big slices out of tubing.
I was watching the fight earlier on, and I noticed sort of after the first sort of hits that the sort of flipper section of Mammoth was slightly bent in sort of in its frame. That when that final sort of charge came in, when it did go backwards, it then fully buckled and broke. Then it was interesting to see, the sort of mechanics of that fight. It's always interesting to see how Mammoth sort of deals with different competitors. It is so strange that you just wonder what it's going to do next and how it might, sort of have failure modes or how it's staying together. We saw in the huge fight, they had massive gashes out of their tubing, and yet it managed to stay in one piece just.
Yeah.
So it was very peculiar, and it was a shame. I think Ricky was disappointed to see that the chain of the sort of flipping mechanism had gone, because they had a lot of issues with that previously.
Yeah, but I think at that point we were, they were upside down on top of us. We were stuck there, by the way.
Yeah, definitely.
How nervous were you that you just couldn't get out and just thought, oh, well, is that it?
Mortified, because this is a result of, still our driving teething issues that we were having. So their weight was on top of us, and that was enough to just stop it altogether.
No.
Another caveat of brushless motors.
Yeah.
So when they can finally wiggle a motor and get out from underneath,
and then you escaped.
And then came the full send.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So
well,
I'm assuming that wasn't intentional. Let's just clear that up. Absolutely not.
They talked about it a little later. Where that was my favorite part of the episode too, where they got the Mammoth guys out by the parking lot, and you have Kurt drop up did they get the tag number? Dang!
That was my favorite part of the whole episode.
It was so good.
So, yeah, we're sitting there in the middle of the arena looking at them, weapons at full speed, and I'm trying to get Ricky's attention because in previous years we're in that booth, but
there's a screen.
You can look at each other and you can go hit the other guy if you need to. But there's a giant plexiglass wall because of COVID, so we couldn't get their attention. And so I'm flailing my arms, trying to get their attention, and finally, hand wave some amount. And I'm like, another one? And they're like, yeah! and I'm like, okay. With the follow-on important detail of just don't hit the battery box. But I couldn't hear anything.
Yep.
So,
another limitation of that wall.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay.
To be fair.
So I line up and I'm like, okay, well, what do I hit? Because there's not a whole lot to hit on Mammoth. That's one of the things is you look kind of for the biggest visual mass, which happens to be the battery box. And also, when we backed into the screw, our rear left wheel got tweaked in. There was a bit of a toe in. I mentioned in the post.
Yeah, you were saying at the end of the fight there was something like that happen.
Yeah, which meant that I was driving towards the left. I was veering left, in a straight line. So I think I was lining up to hit the wheel, which I'm not sure they would have appreciated either.
Hey, they asked for a hit, and also apparently you're not fully to blame.
Through everything else. Yeah. But yeah, so I started going for the wheel, and it goes just enough to the side that it hits the one thing I'm not supposed to hit. And then all the magic smoke comes out, and we're like, oh no, we did the thing. And then it just kept going and going, and it was this was like a fight or two after the the axe backwards Shrederator fight, so there was already a delay that day, that evening, and then Mammoth starts smoking for a long time, and then they take it outside and it just keeps smoking for probably the better part of an hour. So
Wow.
we felt bad.
Part
To
of
be fair,
me,
if you're gonna aim for, as you said, there's not a lot to hit on Mammoth. So if they've asked you to turn them back over, you're gonna aim for the biggest surface area, aren't
right?
you?
Yeah.
Right, and yeah, our discs are so sharp on purpose, but we like to cut through things instead of hit and throw. So I think an uppercut-ish more type weapon, or even a witch doctory weapon would probably do a better job of grabbing a tangled mess of tubes and throwing it and maybe getting them over. But it wouldn't work for us. It would just cut right through.
Okay. I was gonna say I was kind of hoping, not in like a sadistic kind of way, that like mid-interview you kind of had the fire a la Chompalot in Robot Wars a few years ago, like you're talking to you
then
in the
goes,
background. Oh, oops.
Oh yeah, their robot's on fire. Yeah.
Yeah, it was on fire pretty well, smoking a lot very quickly. We were like, we did a bad
chemical batteries.
You'd have them. It is a win though.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
1-1.
You kind of in that kind of mid-pack conversation of winning you're in, a loss, and it's possible, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, I'm in rusty territory.
Mean, in the presence of a god. I mean, come on.
You guys are a mess.
At this point, where did you feel quite confident going forward? Did you think that you had enough in you to go further?
We knew the robot had the potential. Even in the Gruff fight, we felt like we were doing well, and we had lots of opportunities, but the drivetrain was holding us back. And obviously, losing your chains and sitting there dead in the water doesn't help. No. This was better, but it still wasn't right. It wasn't perfect yet. So we were hopeful. We knew that the robot could withstand it for the most part, but who did they put you up against? Was Gruff the hard robot? Was Mammoth the hard robot? Or is the hard robot yet to come?
We shall find out in due course, I'm sure.
The trailer divers amongst you may already know the next matchup, I think.
There is evidence out there. There is evidence out there. If you want to go and find it, by all means go and find it. But obviously we can't talk about it here.
Yes.
Due to many NDAs. We'll get slapped down very quickly. Let's talk about Fight 5 before we get in trouble. Which is Sporkinok and SubZero. I'm a bit surprised. This is not a shot against Sporkinok at all. I'm a bit surprised that they didn't give SubZero like a proper challenge. Because, again, this is not a shot at Sporkinok. It's a wonderful thing. And
it's a seeding thing. Like what if SubZero wins this fight, and they do end up winning this fight, obviously, but where do you put them now that 2-1?
Yeah. Like their wins are against Sporkinok and Grabot, which thus far neither have got a win. I would have thought they'd have put them against at least like a 1-on-1 kind of level machine. Like this is their third fight. They've won 2.
Or is this an instance where this technically was their first or second fight?
We'll never know.
I think we're all in order.
Okay, good.
It was impressive though, SubZero. I mean, they can only beat the opposition that's in front of them, and they did exactly that. They threw them around the arena. I think they wanted to get them out. It didn't quite happen this time.
No. They got close on a couple of occasions. I think.
I tell you what they did throw out though. They threw out their own pneumatics.
Yeah. They were just, they didn't care. They were just like, fine, we'll just carry on flipping.
It worked. Arguably better.
Yeah. They had more range of motion.
It was honestly incredible. Like I was surprised that it kept working, because you've seen it in previous, particularly in Robot Wars, where the pneumatics goes bang and there's nothing. You can't flip. It's just a wedge at that point, or whatever. Spawn again, for example, many years ago. SubZero just kept going. It doesn't care. It's carried over that trait of being very difficult to kill. I feel like I know it didn't work entirely against Jackpot earlier in the season, but it still has that reputation, to me at least, where you're probably going to have to do some serious damage and knock it out if you're going to do it.
To do carbide level damage.
Yeah.
Cobalt level damage. This is the US, not the UK.
It's worth saying that SubZero's first match against Jackpot, wherever that may have come in the season, it was still a good showing from them. They were doing well in that fight, and it's just a shame that they cut out. So it's still a robot to be sort of not to take lightly. Yes, they may have sort of weaker wins than some other teams, but they're still wins on the board, and they are still like a reasonably good loss. Better than some losses we've seen in the past. Cobalt Duck comes to mind as a utter thrashing, but still won it. So yeah, it's still a reasonably good set of results for SubZero, and they are a flipper in amongst a field of not many of them. They have the ability to throw your robot out of the arena or turn you over at a point where you can't self-right. So there's something to sort of, I think, in a field where there aren't many flippers, it's definitely something to look out for in the round of 32.
Yeah, they want some parity, like some a good blend of robots. If you're going to pick maybe the best flipper, that would be nice. In a field of a lot of kinetic energy, and we've talked about that many times. Where we have to have a good representation, I guess, of robots in the bracket. I mean, it depends on what the selection committee wants to see in the end. But I'd be curious to see if they make the bracket who they end up going up against, because I really think they could do something. They could be a thorn.
They have at least used their flipper in every single fight they've been in.
Yeah, definitely.
They have indeed, unlike certain other teams.
Stop it.
Well, obviously, you fought Sporkinok in the Bounty Hunters. Obviously, we can't talk too much about that at the moment. It's still main season time. But how do you rate Sporkinok in terms of a first-time entry?
It's a first-year robot with very small budget, really short build time frame. They were going to actually build a kinetic flipper, with a flywheel and all clutch system, but quickly realized that just wasn't in the cards with the time and the budget. So they pivoted to the lifter and spork hammer mechanism, and Lily, for the most part, was working on it by herself. She had some team mates, Liz and the other Nick, but it was kind of a one-person show, and for a good portion of it, and not with big budgets, not really with big sponsors or anything. So good to get there, but I have mixed feelings about letting in a whole bunch of the new robots that found out in like late August.
Yeah, because it's very tough, because you're going to put these robots in front of eyes, and then people are going to judge and be like, "Oh, this team's not any good. This, that, and the other."
Right,
and it's not fair to them.
Kind of setting them up for failure.
Yeah,
in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah,
like throwing a first-year quarterback fresh out of college, throw him into the game and have him get smashed. So
right. Yeah, let's throw them into the Pro Bowl and see how they do.
Yeah. You are right, because obviously, for example, take yourself. Obviously, you found out quite late. You had all the difficulties. Obviously, you have a lot of good connections. You've had sponsorship throughout the years, and they're obviously going to support you at fairly short notice. Whereas Sporkinok, bless them, they didn't really have that kind of reputation going with them. So
right, they're starting from scratch.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very difficult. I do agree. Like, it's a shame, because they put a good show against Rusty. Obviously, we saw them flip them over. A bit unfortunate. They kind of I think the one side drive kind of died, didn't it, in that fight?
Yeah.
But they got some air miles with SubZero, which is always good fun, and they got to go to BattleBots, which is again
this is more experience.
The number one goal. They got to the show,
exactly,
and that was achieved. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, two of the teams that got to the show were Tracer and Bale Spear in fight number 6. They both had a fight cut. I think Tracer was fighting Hijinks, which Hijinks won, and Bale Spear fighting. Remind me, Jevon, you're going to know this one.
Deadlift.
Yep. The Swole
finally
guys.
Got to see Deadlift. We've seen them on the screens. I think they've gotten more. They've gotten more Opera Box screen time than I think any other.
In their fight time.
I think they're making it up to them or something.
It's a shame too, because Deadlift, for those that have seen Bounty Hunters will know that Deadlift is quite a cool robot. It is a good fun little thing. There wasn't much of a fight here between Tracer and Bale Spear. We got to see Tracer's mini-bot do its thing, which was nice.
Yeah.
It did its thing.
Bale Spear
didn't really get a chance to fight.
No, it had its barn door ripped off, and then Tracer did manage to do something I wasn't expecting from it, which was sort of do what Cobalt did really well last year in popping a robot up and then hitting the underside really well. It was fascinating to see that was how Tracer attacks. We haven't really, other than the first hit on Ribot in their first fight, we haven't really got to see what Tracer does. So it was a really good showing from them to see, that Tracer works like this, and it worked really well. The mini bot, as you said, Steve, it managed to get under and immobilize Bale Spear so that Tracer could come in and give it
some welly.
Yeah, it really makes me curious. It really makes me curious to see what like a Tracer 2 or a Retracer, if they could call it that, that'd be all right. It would be neat to see if it comes back and what kind of improvements that they make. Obviously, they need a self-writer. We've seen pictures of it.
They did mention, didn't they, in the post-fight interview? I think they said, just get the stream back on it next time.
Yeah.
One of those things where I think that because they were due to come next year, that was what they were building for. And then the delay kind of helped them out and brought them in early. But...
How about 2 months? Yeah,
it's another instance of quick turnaround. First team technically, even though he has experience with BattleBots before that we heard about in this episode as well. So, I mean, a lot's changed since he last fought. So,
alas, no Farmageddon this time.
No. Well, no, there was a Farmageddon when they were walking in.
No Farmageddon from the robot itself.
No. They were taken around the back and shot, weren't they? That's what I said. Tracer now at 1 and 2. It's a bit of an ask, I think, for them to get in the bracket. What do you boys think? Given their opponents, they've had Hijinks and Ribot. They're two young machines, but
yeah, I don't know. Nothing is impossible this year. If this year has taught me anything, nothing is impossible. Anything is likely to happen.
Say a robot lower on the seedings ends up not being able to make the bracket, like for some technical reason, then it's possible. But other than that, I really don't think this is their time. And they'll come back next year, maybe, and with improvements and
bit more knowledge.
Yeah.
This year's strength of schedule matters much more than your actual record.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
That's a primer for the top 32. So don't get old.
Get exclusives over here. Let's go.
I recently created a Days Without Controversy poster, and I can see we're going to have to use it.
Well, there's nothing controversial about this main event this week, which is Whiplash and Gruff. Driving excellence by Matt Vasquez. I don't think there's much more I need to say other than that. It was like the thing that is illustrated to me just how good Matt is at driving was the last kind of 20-30 seconds where Gruff is in that corner and he just does not give him an inch to breathe.
No, he's trying to get up. It's like somebody who has stood over you and you're trying to stand up and he's just pushing you back down again every time.
Right, and this is showing a certain robot that you don't need a frame that's 12 feet long to keep somebody in the corner. You can actually
be aggressive in doing it.
Indeed,
exactly.
And use your weapon and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get too carried away, but yeah.
I know. I'm
sorry. We love you.
Sorry, the hot flush came back on.
No, sorry. I'm a pot stirrer. I can't help it.
I was a bit surprised that Gruff didn't kind of repair. Like it seemed like they didn't repair their fight after yourself, Will, because they didn't have the wedgelet on and they didn't have the forks on the floor. Was that a weight issue? Do you know?
I think it was a weight issue. I'm not sure. So the following is total conjecture. But they did have both fire pods on. So if they wanted 2 flamethrowers, they needed to lose weight somewhere. And the frame is just so darn thick and heavy that it's probably the only place they needed to get half a pound or a pound.
He lives like right around my corner. I can go knock on his door and be like, "Hey, why didn't you do this?"
Yeah, what gives?
Why did you do this?
Why are you here? I have no idea who you are.
It does. Yeah.
Everyone needs paper mache, alternative parts so that they can, just sub them out.
Dummy. Yeah.
No one will.
Oh, totally. Yep.
I rate that. No, I think Gruff for me. I looked at this fight at the start, and I kind of thought if Whiplash is using its spinner because it has got a pure lifter setup as well. If it's using its spinner, I don't see how Gruff wins this because Whiplash generally doesn't die. Like it's only knocked out by very, very good machines.
Yeah.
And Gruff would struggle to knock it out, and I feel like it was going to be tough to outdrive Matt as well. I mean, there's no shade on Gruff because Gruff did a good job. They stayed in the fight. They kept going for 3 minutes. That's all you can really ask for.
I mean, I feel their tactics going in, as they said, I guess we've learned we need to be lower next time. I think their main tactics was just grab a hold, burn, because as we've said, they've got two of the flame pods on instead of one this time. So their main tactic was to ignite, and they managed to get some flame in, but it is all about that grab and hold and control. And I believe there's a rule where you can't ignite your flamethrower next to the wall of the battle box. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, so there's a barrier. There's a faint black/gray line about 8 feet away from the wall, and you can use fire within that, and you cannot use it up against the wall. So the whole tactic that seems like a great tactic of grabbing them, pushing up against the wall, and then hitting with fire, you cannot do.
Yeah,
but you can drive them into the wall while the fire's on, as was seen in your fight.
Right. As long as the refs start yelling at you in your ear. Turn it off! And Trey's like terrified that someone's going to melt.
Picks up his flamethrowers.
Yeah. Does Lexan melt? Let's find out.
Tell that to Uppercut next time.
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. Both of them move to 1-on-1. I think Whiplash, it depends who their last fight is, but I'm fairly sure if it's a 1-2 for them, I think they're going to be there or thereabouts. It's Whiplash.
They had to win this fight, if nothing else.
Yeah.
If they lose this fight and go to 0-2, I'm sorry, what?
They lost to Sawblaze, darn.
Yeah.
Right,
I know,
darn.
Right? Obviously, they got some revenge for their fellow fluorescent yellow brother, which is always nice.
Thank you very much.
Gruff, I think they're fairly safe as well, to be honest with you. I think, a win against Hypershock is always fairly good. Obviously not for Will, bless him, but... and Whiplash, as we've said, established, serial winner at this point. I mean, they mentioned in the episode the robots that Whiplash has lost to.
Yeah, they've lost to a
Quite
who's
the
who of
list.
robots.
It's
Yeah,
quite
Tombstone twice, Sawblaze,
And Witch Doctor.
and Witch Doctor.
Could be worse.
Yeah, and Bite Force.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that robot.
Yeah.
Bite
who?
Force? Never heard of it.
Fight Force.
Bite Force. Butt Force.
Fight Force.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up the fight and the episode. Will, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute joy having you on, my friend.
Happy to be on. Pleasure.
And yeah, best of luck for the rest of the season. Obviously, we can't discuss future fights, but I hope that machine stays intact of yours, because it's Jevon's
I know
great
one of
right
us
now.
does.
I have to say, like, bit of like context in. Like, I thought, I was determined to try and get you on the podcast this year, so I figured I'd ask at some point, and then I told Jevon, and Jevon just literally exploded with excitement.
So I was due to be coming to California for BattleBots before COVID all flared up, and I had asked a friend of all of ours, your own Leverloo, who is on the junior team, if he would ask some of the Roboteers, if I may interview a few people, and Will was very kindly one of the people who said yes. So to then hear that I couldn't go and I wasn't going to be interviewing Will, it was very disheartening. So the fact that you've agreed to come on the show today, it means a lot to me. I'm sure a lot to the other boys. Both Absolutely. Me and Steve called Hypershock as... Was it you, Steve, or is it Shane? I can't remember.
It is me.
Yeah, we called you to win the season before we knew the context of what happened just before the season. So
wow, that's a tall order.
Yeah,
I know.
No pressure.
We won't hold it against you if it doesn't happen. But
oh, good.
Until next season, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as it's echoed that we've been massive fans of Hypershock for the last 5 years. It's always a robot that, no matter if it wins or loses, it's gonna part of the show. And I think that's kind of your match, really. Like, I don't think you like to win, but it's not the be all and end all. And
that's the goal. Preferably win, but if we're gonna lose in style.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, you're gonna keep doing this as long as it's still fun. So.
Yeah, I mean, we had to buy a neon sign and start to sponsor other robots.
That thing's amazing. That's something I wanted to discuss, actually. The sponsored by Hypershock is just such a wonderful thing to do for your fellow Roboteers. The teams that maybe can't afford to get there, can't get the big sponsors and everything. The fact that you're willing to put some of your own money into there and say, you know what, I love your robot. I'm going to help you out and come to BattleBots. It's it's a true showing of the camaraderie of the Roboteers in the community.
Well, I appreciate that. The goal was the original reason that all of this started was mostly spite, because there's a certain company, I'm not going to name them, but there's a certain company that has sponsored lots of robots, and their deal is we'll give you a 25% discount on merch, on our product. And if you make it into the top 16, another 25%. Top 4, 75% off. And if you make it all the way to the finals, we'll finally give you these things for free.
Capitalism.
Yeah. And we thought, that's a load of crap. Like, I'll sponsor you for, whatever it was. Yeah, it's a certain battery company. So not crazy amounts of money that they're offering up to these teams. It just bothered me at a core level. So I was like, screw it, I'll sponsor you for that. And then it kind of snowballed into, well, we would like to see greater diversity of color, composition, and robot designs. So how do we encourage that without a BattleBots selection committee coup? You sponsor the ones you like.
I mean, it makes sense, and I think personally, I think the flex of having a neon sign in the pits as well is just incredible.
I think it's amazing.
It was the best $2,200 I've ever spent.
Worth every penny.
And if you want to get yours, just sell all of your organs, probably.
That's one less sponsor we can do.
Oh, fantastic! Well, anyway, it has been honestly an absolute joy having one, and I hope you come on again. I really do.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you very much. Anyway, I've been SamElit64.
I've been Steve the American Killjoy.
I've been Will the Woodrow.
I've been Will from Will's Hypershock, apparently.
There we go.
And the three of us, at least, will see you next week for more BattleBots. We'll see you then.